I also think the amount of times that you go to the cards with the same question is important. So it's just like magic, right? We wouldn't cast a spell and do a magical working to get a new job and then recall mentally and energetically that energy all the time. We wouldn't poke it. You let that magic go out into the universe and let the universe find the best, most effective, most glorious, fantastic way of getting you what you want, while you do the magic, while you meet the magic halfway and do what you need to do. So the tarot can also be the same way. It's like none of these pieces of knowledge, your intuition, being able to sit with something, maybe dreams about it or reflections later, is ever going to sink in or have space and time if you're constantly asking the same question and not giving yourself time to contemplate, just have time with yourself. Because if you can't allow yourself to be alone with your thoughts and reflect, no matter what you do, if you're constantly surrounded by noise, I don't really feel like much of it can come in and kind of illuminate anything for you.
Welcome to Coffee and Divination, a podcast about the arts of obtaining hidden knowledge in changing times. Join me, Joanna Farrar, to chat with experts from around the world on tarot, runes, geomancy, and the many ways divination can help us navigate and plan our paths ahead.
Today's episode is an interview with Ethony Dawn, author, tarot reader, and teacher. In this conversation, we focused on the foundations of learning tarot well, how we can build skill through practice, how to develop trust in your own readings, and begin shaping your tarot identity, your own voice and style, and the way you work best with the cards. We also talk about different types of spreads, creating spreads, and how to choose approaches that support the questions that you're asking. This is an accessible episode whether you are new to tarot or simply want to strengthen your basics and feel more confident as a reader. Before we begin, one more note. Based on some feedback I've gotten from you, our lovely listeners, I've created a free resource over at our website, coffeeanddivination.com, which is a divination workbook called the Divination Clarity Practice Book. It is a simple way to track your readings and notice patterns in those readings so you can build discernment in your practice over time. You can get it for free right now over at our website at coffeeanddivination.com. Enjoy this episode, and if you do, please consider sharing it with a friend who might enjoy it as well. And say hi to me over on Instagram, where I am at Coffee and Divination. Grab your coffee or your tea, and let's begin. So it is my pleasure to have on the show Ethony Dawn, someone who has published a number of books that I am excited to introduce our listeners to. And thank you so much for making the time to be on our show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So we have a traditional first question on this show, which is, what was your first introduction to divination? So the first time that you encountered the arts of divination. This doesn't mean that you were practicing it, but it could have been like a friend or a family member. What was the first time you sort of were exposed to it?
That is a very good question because I found it so young, which I think my very first kind of exposure to anything mystical was probably when I was around 13, and it was the classic, like at a camp and everyone wanted to do a Ouija board. It didn't end up happening because we all scared ourselves out of it. And then I was trying to think, like I didn't watch a lot of like scary stuff or things that could be deemed to be scary, kind of as a teenager. And I found the tarot and divination when I was 15, and then my mother actually let me know that my grandmother used to read with Lenormand cards, and I was like, we talked about that before. So yeah, I think divination was probably 15, but my mum did have this amazing book of Chinese astrology and a great book on astrology growing up. So I used to pour through that when I was a kid, but yeah, probably about 15.
So when you encountered that when you were 15, what was the deck that you started with? Did you go with Lenormand or some other decks, or did you go straight to sort of the classic Rider-Waite?
I went straight to tarot. So a part of my back then training with reconstructed modern Wicca was to have a year and a day journal. And one of the practices that you were required to show is that you were doing divination, whether that was like for self-reflection or for just really to increase your intuition, because such a great way of increasing and stretching those intuitive muscles. And I picked the tarot, and my very first deck was the 1986 version. It wasn't back in 1986, but it was the 1986 version of the Mythic Tarot. And then my second one was the Celtic Dragon Tarot by Lisa Hunt, which was a little bit more Rider-Waite, but those were my first two.
Yeah. So when you were first kind of encountering that and doing that as part of your year and a day, is that something that you then went to certain books? Did you go to the library to find things, or did you just muddle along on your own, or kind of how did that go when you were 15 years old and exploring that? Because I had
Yeah,
the
I
same
was
when I was a teenager as well. So
Yeah, I was really lucky, but also kind of it was a little bit hard too, because this was back before everyone had the internet, no one had a cell phone. And so a lot of stores that had books like, Cunningham's Classics and things like that, they were locked away or they were behind, they were like wrapped in plastic. We have quite a big pagan community. Um, in Australia. It's quite large, it's very open. So it was easier to find things. I definitely utilized the library a lot. I took lots of 5 cent photocopies and things like that. And then my tarot books, I just read as many as I could. Like there were a few fantastic stores, and I would save up my allowance and my babysitting money, and I would go and buy them. And yeah, just read and reread them and kind of got my hands on absolutely as much as I possibly could.
yeah. And you stress in the book that's coming out with Llewellyn, that's upcoming, the importance of journaling and writing things down right from the very start. I could not agree more about that importance. Would you say, it sounds like from what you were talking about, this grew immediately out of that year and a day? Is that something that influenced your practice from then on, or was it, something that you sort of did and then fell away from and went back to?
So I am such a stationary hoe. Hopefully you're saying hoe is okay here. I could have said something a lot more, a lot racier. But I freaking love pens and stickers and notebooks, and oh my gosh, you could lose me in a bookstore, especially like secondhand bookstores or a stationery store. Like forget it. It is so dangerous. So, but I've had journals ever since I was very young, way before I found my spiritual practice. And yes, you go through them and they're a little bit angsty and you're like, oh my goodness. But it did get me into a really good practice. So the year and a day was just an extension of that, more focused on what's going on in your environment, weather-wise, what birds are you seeing out, or what wildlife are you seeing, how are you feeling in the morning with, the days getting longer or shorter or whatever it may be, and then observing the special holidays and the moons and doing your divination practice. And I love having a record of what I'm learning because it allows me to go back when I'm doing divination and I'm doing predictive readings, because that is how I was taught, was to read predictively. It wasn't, I don't want to be like back in the day, the good old days, but back in the I'm going to say it, back in the early noughties, there wasn't as much emphasis, I mean, at least I found, on self-reflecting tarot readings for yourself or counseling readings or using it for creativity. Sure, that was always there, but it was more that classic divination, fortune telling aspect. And I learned that way from my teachers as well when I did get a formal teacher. So I loved having records of what my reading was, because then I was able to ascertain my accuracy. It also gave me a good place to kind of get things off my chest if there was a very heavy or a very intense session or reading. And then it also just builds your own sort of shorthand of what the cards mean and what they mean to you. And like all these cards kept on coming up in this situation. Or you're like, oh, this is kind of like, this feels very similar to a reading I had before. So you have a record. Now it's great because we have things like Zoom where everything is recorded. But I still take notes. I think we're obsessed with getting all the information correct 100% of the time right now because of the supercomputers we have in our hands and overnight delivery and all that kind of stuff. Whereas there is something about the intention and the effort when you are writing with pen and paper to take that time, that special time. And this is very also in my Wiccan thing, when you're like writing in, your book of shadows, you're taking that time and you're putting that effort into some recording to be special. So I still record everything, even with my client work, and I still have notebooks full of notes on tarot and all sorts of stuff. So, and it's a great self development tool, like a growth tool as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that also ties into the idea that the time that we take to do these things is a part of the marker that we take it seriously, which then kind of will enable us to get more from the experience because we have signaled to the spirits and to ourselves that this is important enough that I'm going to spend that extra time, even though, especially because we can do it without the time now with technology. So yes.
Yeah. And I wish that I do say to like all of my students and to people who come to me to pick my brain about becoming a professional tarot reader, and it's just allow yourself and allow your practice to take time. Like I'm sure you can remember, Joanna, when you were first discovering this stuff and you just felt like every little, like every page was a new discovery, every book you were picking up you were like really like it was aha moments or a wonderful new like first, and then it's been 25 years, nearly 26 years for me, and now I'm like, yeah, those firsts were a long time ago and I still love it. It definitely wasn't a phase, but it's not the same as like the first time you get like that really amazing feedback of, oh shit, that reading was like really great, or like you access a part of your intuition you didn't think you had, or you reclaim a part of your intuition that you had shut down. So don't rush it. That's like a huge piece of advice to say to people. Just allow things to take the time, because when you take the time, it sticks.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense and is a very important reminder for everyone. You mentioned about like some of those first experiences. I would love if you could sort of retell, was there a certain reading or something when you were working with tarot when you were younger that made you kind of sit up and go, oh, oh, this works? Because I mean, even having done this for a very long time, I still have readings where I go, oh wow, sometimes they're very literal. So I mean, it never goes away, but is there one in particular that you can remember from when you were younger that kind of comes up sometimes in your memory?
Yeah, there are a couple, but one that there was one where I had I actually did a reading for this guy I had a crush on, and he was like, "Well, you can give me a reading." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to do that," because like I was expecting, maybe certain cards to come up, and I was just like freaking out a little bit, but I still did it. And yes, some of the cards I remember, like the Two of Cups coming up, and we were, by the way, we were end up being together for 5 years. But like, but I was like, oh, am I putting? I don't want to put the cart before the horse, and I didn't even shuffle the cards. He shuffled the cards. I let my clients and my parents shuffle the cards if possible, unless we're on like something like Zoom. But so I was not tampering with that whatsoever. But that was like a pretty like, oh, and then when it came up, I was like, how much about these cards do I talk about, in the context of like it being about romance, because that was a bit awkward. But the other one that I was like, oh my gosh, was when I first did my tarot teachings with an actual teacher, and we were doing readings, we all brought a person to have other students in the class do readings for them. And I was doing that as a part of like our little graduation last thing. The teacher, who I'm still friends with today, came around and said, you're really good at this. You have an absolute knack for this. Like, that was a really good reading. And so did the person I was reading for. And I think as someone who was not necessarily super confident until like I kind of was a late bloomer in my confidence, that really helped, because I was like, is this all in my head? Like, am I like, because it did come quite naturally to me. It was a language and a system I really loved. Um, and I seemed to have this shorthand with it. So it was lovely to get external feedback from someone who'd been doing it for so long, that, this is something that you should think about seriously keeping as a part of your life. Yeah, so those two are pretty big.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they both kind of, we need those moments of outside recognition. Not that we're doing this for external validation, but it's when we have those aha moments that also connect to other people, that we can sort of get out of our own heads a little bit to say, well, this has meaning. This is showing something outside of myself. So it couldn't just be me. I think, yeah, that's an important moment for each of us. So you are also in addition to being an author and a reader, you also, teach quite a bit, and you pass on the ways that you read to other people. And you've already mentioned a few things that are a part of, your practice, i.e., letting the client, actually shuffle the cards beforehand. What are some other pieces of advice? I mean, you obviously have, excellent books to help guide people, but what are some of the things, if somebody came up to you at a cocktail party and was like, what are some pieces of advice you would give to people who are early on in their sort of journey with tarot that you think is very important?
That's a really good
It's a
question.
very
So,
broad question. So,
yes. So I do recommend to people a few things though. One is to find one of the main three tarot systems and learn that and stick with that for a while. So whether that's the Marseille, whether that's the Thoth or the Rider-Waite, because they are different systems. They do speak differently. They do have different meanings or titles, So the Rider-Waite is what I use. It's the majority of my decks, and it's what I teach. But I do have all sorts of divination cards, all sorts of cartomancy, and many decks that I love that aren't Rider-Waite Smith. So that would be the first one. So like really getting to know a system, not necessarily a deck, but a system, because as you know, the Rider-Waite Smith, there's lots of clones, there's lots of different inspired by, so you can find something that you're going to really resonate with. The always be open to learning and reading. I'm really not a big gatekeeper. So if someone says to you that you need to, you can't buy your first deck, or you have to be some like third incarnation of someone of lineage to read the tarot, I'm like, okay, all right, we've got one of those. So really just be aware of gatekeeping in any way, shape, or form. And then to try using the tarot in different ways to see what kind of individual reading style you're going to come up with, because some people do not work with spirit guides or do not work with spirit when it comes to their tarot practice, but they'll use it more analytically, or they'll use it in their counseling practices. They may use it for problem solving, or character development, in a creative aspect. Other people do, and they may then use it for mediumship, or they may use it for shadow work, or use it for any divination practices. Or you could really just love the getting to know you part of the tarot, which is a huge tenet of like know thyself. So, but try different things, try a little bit of each one. Not necessarily, don't just like call yourself a tarot counselor one day, like, but because that's not cool. But don't limit the way in which you can use the cards. But I think those would be my big three things. And even I'm learning to this day, and I love continuing to learn, because if you're not learning or you're not open to learning, like, what are you even doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important, especially the idea of not necessarily forever, but I also completely agree that like just you have to choose something to focus on and so that you don't get overwhelmed, particularly when you're starting out. So choosing one system is really important because otherwise, if you mix too many things together at the beginning stages, then it's just really hard. It works for some people, not going to say it doesn't, but it can generally be easier. And that is a very good point. That kind of goes into something in your latest book. You talk about, and I think you have an exercise around figuring out what kind of tarot reader you will be. And I really like discussions of that because I feel like, I mean, obviously, this comes from having a podcast and interviewing a lot of people. There's a lot of different ways that people who are professionals, people who are amateur or just starting out, think about what it means to be a reader. And we each know what it means to us, but there's a lot of different varieties of what that looks like. There's some people who think that, quote unquote, fortune telling is lower, or other people who say, no, fortune telling is actually the best. It's what it's meant for. What do you mean when you say figuring out what kind of a reader you will be?
Really, really great question. So I think that is a self-reflective journey of understanding how you want to use the tool, because it is a tool, and it is one of the tools that you can use or not in your spiritual toolbox. And there's no right or wrong way of doing anything for sure. And I love that we're in a space now where we're talking more about lots of different ways you can use the cards. But it's more of, for me, helping students and helping yourself find out what, I guess, like what you're naturally maybe more inclined to, and then what you may want to grow with. So, for example, not everyone is going to be happy or want to do readings for other people, because even if they got over the fear of getting it wrong, they maybe don't have the skills or don't even ever want to deliver bad news to people. And as a professional tarot reader, you are going to deliver bad news. It is obviously you have to be good at your bedside manner, otherwise no one's going to want a freaking reading from you. But you also can't be like, it's all fluffy puppies and rainbow lollipops, and then like it's shit, So it's not that your integrity needs to mean so much, but knowing what kind of reader you're going to be, or knowing where you're at least interested in, can give you a really good entry point. And then you can develop obviously a lot of those skills, like communication skills, interpersonal skills, how to deal with difficult situations or even difficult people. But then there are people that are just like happy to use it as a creative thing. So for me, it's like finding your own special secret recipe, secret sauce for your own readings, because there are so many readers out there, whether that's in person or online. And so people are like, oh, how am I going to necessarily carve out a niche for myself or get anyone to come book with me? And it's through things like that, like learning what makes you uniquely special. How do the cards activate your clairs, your intuition? How do you speak with it and speak through it with for people and yourself? So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, no, I think it is important to not only kind of keep that in mind. I think it's first and foremost like just a reminder that not every reader is going to be the same, and that's good. But then also, while you're developing your practice, you are also figuring out what your unique strengths are, and also your weaknesses. Like, what is it you don't want to do? Like your example of not wanting to give people bad news. It is really hard, and it is uncomfortable, and more uncomfortable for some people than others. So that's not necessarily where everyone needs to go, but you have other exercises in the book of various types. And another one that I found very interesting was that you give, I mean, everyone knows spreads are a very, very important part of what we do with tarot, and you have a number of different, very interesting ones. So I have a couple of questions about that. But one of the things I find interesting is that you give some advice on how to create your own spread, which I frequently talk to people about it, and it's shocking to me how many people are like, oh, well, I had to look up what the spread was for that. I'm like, what? But you could just figure out what the spread is from your question, and you break that down kind of nicely. Can you talk about how you think about creating a spread from
Sure,
scratch?
yeah.
You?
Yes. So you mean this little hot number, this book here? Look at she's the
Yes.
chunky monkey too. So um so I actually really am an advocate for tarot spreads because they create a roadmap. And when you have 78 cards, you can be very overwhelming to begin with. And if you're just throwing cards, you could be like just waiting for that one card that could give you the answer, or that you're like, I know the meaning of that card, so I'm going to stop right there. So I like having a roadmap, and I like giving each of the cards contextual information with the tarot spread position. That helps so much. Free form is great. I don't necessarily think people should start there, but that's just my personal kind of my personal thing. Some people love it and they don't do anything else, and that is absolutely fantastic. So what I do for clients now, and I've been doing it for a long time, is I will custom create a tarot spread for them. So if I'm working with a client, I will say, I've got a few tarot spreads that I use quite a bit and build out from. So like a birthday reading where someone comes to me, then I have something that I start with and then we go from there. Or an Orosoma soul purpose reading. I have somewhere to start and then I go from there. But usually it's to answer the question. It's to gain clarity for somebody. It's to give them an empowered way forward. So when I'm talking to a client at the beginning, or a client at the beginning, I'll I feel like I'm pretty good with this too, with my background in HR. Just kind of like, tell me a little bit about what's going on, and then I'm like, okay, now when we get to the heart of the matter, I'll reflect that back, and then I'll build a tarot spread around that. And the key components are always, how best can this person move forward, and how can they empower themselves to make the most out of the situation, put themselves in the best position, or navigate a really tricky situation without, too much confusion and scrapes and things like that while they're trying to find their way through the forest. So I'm very much into an empowered reading stance, but I like doing that. So I'm always answering the question. When I go to a tarot spread, I'm making sure I'm staying on track. It doesn't become about some like off the wall fluffy thing that I'm like, I have ADHD, I can like side quest like nobody's business. So the tarot spread allows me to keep coming back to the question and what the card is saying and how it's answering the question and in the context. So yeah, so I think play around, or edit a tarot spread that you find, and add a few different things to it to make it yours.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that also kind of ties into something that I've seen with some students and friends, where they'll not have made a decision in advance about whether they're going to read reversals or not. And it's the same idea of like, if you don't have a structure in advance, sometimes, I mean, I know people who read, they're basically just psychic and the cards are just being thrown while they are getting information from elsewhere. And I'm like, yeah, you're barely looking at those cards. And that's great too. That is a beautiful and very powerful style of reading. But if you are going to use the structure of the tarot, then generally speaking, knowing in advance can prevent some of our own biases or some of our own confusions from entering the reading, which it's already tricky enough to interpret at times. So does that play into kind of your opinion on reversals, and how do you navigate sort of reversals in readings? Do you decide that in advance? Is it always that you read reversals? Does it depend on the deck? What goes on there for you?
Yeah, I totally agree that giving yourself the gift of that intention and that boundary, or the at least the border, you can always shift it later if it's not working for you, but it does really help. I actually don't read reversals. I write in all of my books and even the guidebooks for the tarot decks I've created. I always give reversal information, because just because I don't read reversals doesn't mean that people who use my decks and people who are reading my books don't. But I don't read reversals because I believe that 78 cards will tell enough of the story, given the context, given the spread, given the question. And also I use as many of my clairs as possible along with my spirit guides. So I believe it can answer the question. If a message is going to come, it's going to come. But I also was taught without reversals. So, and then, but I do know them. And that's the funny thing. It's like Mary K. Greer, who, we all know in the tarot. Well, most of us, I would say 99% of people who know the tarot know Mary. And I'm very fortunate to call her my friend. Like, we are so different sometimes. It is crazy. Like, we are so different in so many ways. And we were chuckling about this in New York, actually, in July. Just like, we're very different, but she reads reversals and she thinks you should read reversals from the jump, right? So, and I'm like, no, I don't read reversals. And like, if you do it later, go right ahead. If a reversal comes up, I turn it up, right? But that's just what works for me. So I say pick, if learning 78 cards is going to be like a lot for you, so try reversals and see. And then if you feel you need that extra indicator of whether this is a good card or a good thing or a bad thing, or it's coming and going, then you can do that. Then you can try them. But again, I just don't get it. Like, I don't personally get how you can have a reversal of the Five of Swords and it still be anything but shit. That is not a great card. Like, it's like, I get that it could be lessened, or oh, it's a hollow victory. It's like, yeah, no one cares when they're like lying wounded on the floor that the person who wounded them has a hollow victory. No, they're feeling pain at that point. So for me, it's like it does what it does. But yeah, pick one, and get your structure, get your foundation solid, and then start breaking all the rules or playing with the rules and trying different things.
I just want to absolutely say that I usually do not read reversals, and my co-high priestess and one of my closest friends absolutely disagrees with me and absolutely reads reversals. So this has been going for many years, our discussion on that, and I'm happy to see both sides of it. But yes, I know exactly what you mean. I think that it is that choice that we make about how we handle it in advance. Not to say that there aren't special circumstances, because even I, who doesn't really read reversals, will sometimes be like, well, this is clear in this context that reversal has a meaning. But most of the time, but that is a thing that over time, we go back to time and the amount of records that you're keeping and patterns that you're noticing. If you're not noticing the patterns and learning from them, well, you're not going to really see how that is working for you and be able to judge effectively if you either need to change it or just in one certain circumstance it's not quite the same. But that choice is important.
Yeah, you've got no way of indexing anything for yourself. I mean, everything moves so freaking fast nowadays too. Like, I can't believe how fast like this year's going. So in order to give yourself some reference points, taking that time to record things down, even if it's just note taking via your voice in a app, or like a journaling app, or on Google Drive while you're walking your dogs or walking your kid to school, just so you've got some record of it. I think it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of, one of the things that when I feel like sometimes when we go to other readers for a reading, purely either because we're going to someone we don't know very well, if we're hiring someone, or we're going to someone that we know, regardless, we respect their time and we want to make sure that we have a clear question. It is sometimes more difficult to get to the heart, as you put it earlier, the heart of our question when we're doing it for ourselves. So is there anything about the kind of the act of getting to the real question you need to ask that you find is good advice for people? Or how do you think about helping people get to a good question?
Oh, that is something that I think is the more you practice, the better. And another great one too, Joanna, about journaling, because if you can go back and see that you've been asking similarly worded questions or similar questions about similar situations or patterns or people, it's like, oh, well, maybe I also need to see a therapist. Like if I'm not able to let this go and it's been 6 months and I'm asking still the tarot about this thing, it's like, girl, maybe you need to go see a therapist about it. But you will find that the more that you do anything, the easier that's going to become. But it depends on also how brutally honest you want to be with yourself. I'm very like, I mean, I think it's a very Australian thing, but like I'll gently get you there, but I'll be like, right, what I'm hearing is this, but what I think you may also want to ask is this, and they're like, yeah, okay. So I also think the amount of times that you go to the cards with the same question is important. So it's just like magic, right? We wouldn't cast a spell and do a magical working to get a new job and then recall mentally and energetically that energy all the time. We wouldn't poke it. We wouldn't bring the lure in, if we're reeling in. I'm not a fishing person, but you wouldn't reel the fish in too early, right? You let that magic go out into the universe and let the universe find the best, most effective, most glorious, fantastic way of getting you what you want, while you do the magic, while you meet the magic halfway and do what you need to do. So the tarot can also be the same way. It's like none of these pieces of knowledge, your intuition, being able to sit with something, maybe dreams about it or reflections later, is ever going to sink in or have space and time if you're constantly asking the same question and not giving yourself time to contemplate, to just have time with yourself. I always find like I have like the most random things when I'm like washing dishes or cooking dinner because my mind's doing something. And that's why so many of our practices have a meditative or mental landscape practice as essential. Because if you can't allow yourself to be alone with your thoughts and reflect, no matter what you do, if you're constantly surrounded by noise, I don't really feel like much of it can come in and kind of illuminate anything for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, with that kind of making space for reflection, another thing that I've heard from some people is the question of, well, how do I make the decision about how many cards I need to pull? Because I remember when I was when I was little and I was first doing this, I would end up with just a mass of cards in front of me. It'd be half the deck was finally on the table by the time I was done, and that is obviously not ideal. And in your most recent book, you kind of progress from 1 to 7 in terms of the numbers of cards in a reading. What would you kind of suggest to people about how they think with how many cards to use for a question? Like, do you usually recommend that people start with 1 card, or is there another one that's like a favorite go-to number that you find is a good place to start?
3 cards are always great. I think a 3 card spread, and I mean beyond the past, present, future, because that one is so done. And actually dealing with the past position in a tarot spread actually is quite nuanced, because you need to know what aspect of that is actually in play and where, and it can get a little bit like skewy. So 3 cards can be great, even if it's a do not, reflect, embrace, release, pause. I've got a bunch of them in the book as well, because it gives you a for and against, or an A and a B, and like a midway, or an action. So 3 can be really great. I love 5. Like 5 is one of my favorites. Fives in tarot and also in numerology is a card of expansion and also agitation and challenge. And I love that because we got to go from the stable 4. We have to add another element in there to get things moving again. So I love like a modified 5 card, which is like almost I don't want to say better, but an easier Celtic cross, where it's sort of you're looking at what is really important or what is on your mind a lot if you're looking at the crown, and then what is actually the foundation of it, like what's really going on. So 5 is really good. I like that one. but I'd say seven. I kind of go to seven in the book because I think by the time that you get to the end of that, if you're using the book as a workbook, because you can also just use it as a reference book, but if you want to learn like the whole thing, it's got lessons in there. That's a lot, and the cards tend to be pretty big, so trying to fit like 22 cards on a table can be really tricky. So that can get a lot. At some point, we stop taking information in as well. Like we do our querents wheel, they won't remember everything, or they won't want to listen to a 45-minute replay, of their own reading. Um, but I do also like if I'm doing a yearly spread, then obviously I'm going to do the 12, but those I'll only do like once a year. I'm not going to be diving into something large all the time because that's a lot. Yeah. So three or five, and then if you're really like feeling a little extra spicy, maybe a seven. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Interesting that you like the fives, which I've had other people talk about how fives are some of their least favorite.
Yeah, they're
And yeah,
tricky.
I mean I do agree with you though, because it is that moment of sort of pivot, because the reason why it's unstable is because then that's where change can come in, which can be scary, but it could also be a place where, well, you're asking about what is going to change and what is going to come, so you might as well go there for it.
Yeah. Lean into it.
So how do you encourage people to think with, or are there sort of myths about dealing with challenging cards? You mentioned earlier about how when you are reading for people, you are very sort of positive minded in terms of setting people up for how they can best deal with the information. So you're not just being like, well, it sucks. Okay, bye. But like, how do you encourage people to think about when the cards come down on the table and they're not ones that they love or they look scary? How do you sort of frame that for yourself and your clients?
Yeah, so I really encourage people to just firstly like just sit with it for a second. This might not necessarily be easy when you're reading for a client, but if you're reading for yourself and a really hard card comes up like the Three of Swords, the Nine of Swords, just sit with it for a moment and just feel into your body as to why it's making you feel uncomfortable. And of course, always with the caveat of if anything ever gets too much, always like close that container and get some support, because mental health and emotional health is not anything to screw around with. But just, sit with that and feel as though, it's like kind of like, okay, well, why is this feeling uncomfortable for me? And also it's a reminder that life isn't, it's not all, even the good stuff doesn't last. Happiness doesn't, you aren't happy 24/7. You aren't mad all the time. Well, here's hoping, but emotions are things that flow. And the best thing you can do is let them flow, let them be a nebulous, moving, changing, dancing thing. Because if you are only chasing the good, then you're really saying that the bad is something to be fearful of. Whereas if you're leaning into like, oh yeah, there's like that's a heartbreak. But the heartbreak at the other end of that heartbreak is, well, I also had the gift of that. But the heartbreak allows you to understand the beauty of life, the pain of life, and also how to connect with other people. But I do a lot of like in the body stuff, and also like a bunch of my training with, mental health and my HR training and all that kind of stuff. So I've got some tools there to kind of help if it does get pretty intense. But with my clients, I just say, hey, look, we can see from these cards, this is really challenging, but we do know now what's going to come up, and we can see some of the things that are going to potentially hit as roadblocks or to be aware of. So we're going to dive into that, but we're also going to give you a way to make like where your allies are, the best way to navigate this, or the things that we can even negate. Sometimes we get that moment before it turns into a full-on tower moment where we can actually right the ship. But denial doesn't help anyone. And so denying your hard feelings, denying the things that you want to hide or that you're struggling, all it does is prolong, right? So that's a really big, it's such a great, important question to ask. And it's always kind of nuanced as to how, but I always want, so like say, for example, my last card in a tarot spread for a client is a hard card. I won't end it there. I will always add a couple of cards to that, or one card, I'll build another position. I won't just put a clarifier on it, I'll build another position just to make sure we're leaving it on a note where it's empowering. Because even in the thralls of heartbreak or dealing with shitty people at work, we still have choice. We can still control what we do with our emotions, with our reactions, our actions, and our intention and time. So, yeah, that's where I come to it.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. Yeah, I like to frame things with, what is the best way to sort of deal with this or approach it? Like, what is the best way that you can be in this moment? Even if it's not the moment you want, there's still a best way that you can sort of navigate it. And that is something that we all can use some extra help with sometimes.
Do you remember the movie Dangerous Minds, or the book? It was a book first.
Oh, yes.
Yes, with Michelle Pfeiffer. The book is fantastic. I recommend, if you haven't, look, we're going back to the 90s, everyone. I know, like, I'm an old lady, but
Yes.
like such a great movie. And I'm paraphrasing because I haven't seen it in a long time, but there's a scene where they're talking about choices. And this is a very marginalized community that doesn't have a lot of options. They don't have privilege like a lot of people do. And they were talking about, well, what do you do when someone's got a gun to your head? That's not a choice. And one of the other characters says, yes, it is. You still have a choice of whether you're going to die on your knees or die standing up, whether you're going to scream or not. We may not like that's very extreme, but it always stuck with me because that is a terrible, hopefully no one ever has to come up against something that's like that, right? Where both decisions suck or you feel like you don't have one. But it's like, even in the worst situations life is going to throw at you, you still have a choice of what you're going to do in that situation. So again, I know that was very like, it went very like very extreme, but great book, great movie, and a good example of like there's always a choice.
Yeah. No, and I think that that's very appropriate for divination as a process as well, because it's meant to help us foreknowledge. Forewarned is forearmed, in the sense that if we do have some of that foreknowledge, then we can hopefully in a moment have a little bit more of a break to say, okay, I can choose my decision. I can't choose anybody else's decision, but I can choose my own. And if divination kind of helps us have that moment to reflect and make a better choice for ourselves, that's very powerful. Even if it's not not what we want, it's still very, very important. So yeah, I agree. Much that we hope it will not be dramatic in any sense of the word like that. It is important to think with. So there's another kind of, mentioning movies brings into mind one of the things that you have, which I think is a lovely exercise about kind of greeting cards and thinking with cards, and thinking to yourself about either people you know or people from movies or characters, and casting them as different cards. Can you maybe walk us through that? Because I really like that exercise. I do that with a couple of different forms of divination, and I think that's super, super exciting and interesting for people.
Yeah, so thank you. So this actually started with this was my first book with Llewellyn, Your Tarot Court. And I started I wrote this book because so many of my students, like the tarot court cards, will come up and they'll be like, uh-oh, spaghetti-o, like, what do I do? So I wrote this one first, and one of the exercises, I actually give examples for each one of the tarot court because I put them into archetypal, I give them archetypes versus them being male, female, all that kind of stuff. So I did that. So what I wanted to do was, instead of it being the archetype from the tarot court, but looking at all of the cards. And so I love that because it gives you a way of looking at life through the lens of the tarot, and also having it on your mind so that when, for example, something comes up, and you're like, oh, this reminds me of that. It's another way to help your memory make those connections to information. So I enjoy doing that because it's another way you can learn about the cards, and you can learn about the people in your life. And you're forming those sort of shorthands through knowing pop culture or your favorite person in your life, so that you're like, oh, okay, that reminds me them of that. I like archetypes or like character energy more than I will also do like, does this card remind me of someone in my life? But people, we're very complex. Characters aren't necessarily always as complex as we are because we don't have the same amount of time with them in a movie or a book. But yeah, I like to do that as a great way to explore the cards meaning.
Yeah, and that also kind of helps move things from the page of like, oh, I read a thing and someone told me that the Knight of Pentacles is this, versus, oh yeah, I remember a character from a movie that I can sort of shorthand into that and remember that that reminds me of all those different inflection points that could come
Yes.
up. Yeah.
The Knight of Pentacles is my Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Reliable, loyal, steadfast, grounded. That's a person you would put your hands in, like he carries Frodo up the mountain, he's there till the very, very end, and he has such a good heart. And those are the very positive things.
Mhm.
Of the Knight of Pentacles. So yeah, just I wanted to say like that's my Samwise Gamgee card is the Knight of Pentacles.
I love it. I had not thought of that for Knight of Pentacles, but I agree. I think that's very, very Samwise energy. Um, so as we kind of like wind closer to the close, there, well, obviously is lifetimes of discussion around tarot, but when you are talking to people about tarot right now, I find oftentimes that there are certain themes that I find coming up in conversations that I'm having with people that seem to be occurring very often, either just because of like the situations we find ourselves in or the situations that you find your clients are in. What is some advice that you feel like you're repeating a lot right now, or something that you want to share with people that's been coming up?
Yeah, get the F off of the internet. And not like on stuff like this where you're intentionally sitting down to learn or connect with the community. But like honestly, I don't know how anyone watches the news anymore. I don't know how anyone is engaged in keyboard battles with people. Turn off the TV. Like, advertise. It's all freaking white noise. And I love watching movies. I love the movies. I love YouTube. I love it. Like, I love consuming content, but also actually make sure you're creating or you're cultivating as much as you're consuming. Or if not, I like to make sure I'm doing more of that versus consuming. And if you're consuming, do it with intention. Consciously consume. Say, I'm going to spend a couple of hours. I'm going to really enjoy, like, I'm a gamer. I'm going to really enjoy playing my video game. I'm going to give myself this time slot, but then I'm going to go and do this. But just please stop watching the fucking news. Like, oh, sorry. Hopefully the I'm Australian. I've been like trying so
Okay.
hard to be like not swearing, but turn it off. Turn off the TV with the ads. Don't get involved in petty stuff with arguing online. There is so much important stuff that is happening in the world right now, and it can be so overwhelming. Do not get pulled down in the weeds so that you can't do what is important for yourself and your community. You're better off just unplugging from some of the crap that's being fed to us all the time, and then going, you know what, if I fill my cup back up again, I can go and do the thing or show up to that community event or donate to those people that I want to help or show up in another way, versus feeling like as though you're drowning in the noise. But yeah, that's a big part of it. And please go speak to real people. Like, please go and connect with real people. um, it's so easy when you isolate yourself for anyone to manipulate us into believing that we are other from each other. We're not. We are so much more. We all get out of this. None of us get out of this alive. We all bleed the same. Like we all want the same things at the end of the day, whether we're full of bravado or not. It's like, go speak to people, like, and touch some freaking ground and hug a tree. And yeah, I'm very, very much about real world in the moment. But yeah, get away from the noise.
I could not agree more. No one could see or hear my reaction to that, but yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think that also, it's a part of what I think makes divination unique, is that what we are talking about, what we're encouraging people to do, what your books are encouraging people to do, is to be, while people may not think of divination as a creative act, it is an act that is not passive. It is absolutely active, and it's that active versus passive that the world right now especially wants us to be very passive and just consume, consume, consume. But that doesn't involve then the reflection and the activity of really being intentional about our decisions and our sort of content that we take in and create and what we do with that information. So I think, if people are like, well, what does that have to do with divination? It has to do with it, because divination is active too.
Yeah, and it activates your inner voice and your inner compass, even if you're doing very divinatory, say, fortune. I love fortune telling. I'm reclaiming that, I just reclaim that for myself all the time.
Yeah.
But it's still opening those intuitive, empathic things where you're like, this is how we also connect to ourselves, and this is how we learn to be more compassionate and kind. And so all of that is super important.
Yeah. Well, that is very, very beautiful. And I really like that we are kind of ending on that. I will, of course, be linking to your website and your books in the show notes, so that will be there for people to find. What are other ways that people can sort of learn from you or find you? What do you want to share with people about that?
Yeah, so I have a ton of free tarot tutorials and content. Much of it is on YouTube, and I also have my tarotreadersacademy.com, where I have free tarot classes, lots of resources. I've got so much on my website as well. So, like books of goddess tarot spreads and money manifestation challenges and all sorts of stuff. So, if you think that we might, be tarot buddies, you can definitely go and check it out, because yeah, I like to share as much as I can. But yeah, YouTube is a great place to be as well.
Very cool. And I will make sure that there are as many links as I can fit in there for what you can find outside of just those basic couple of links. So that is very wonderful. And I'm so excited that that third book is going to be in the world, and I can recommend it to people officially. So thank you for your time and for being on. I am sure we'll find other reasons to talk again on the show. So I
Oh
appreciate
my
it.
gosh. I so hope so. And thank you so much. And I really appreciate you taking the time to check out my book. And I hope that everyone who's listening today has got something, has taken something away from this that has been valuable or inspiring. So thank you.
I am sure of it. Thank you.
Black moon above, stars overhead. Don't you dare guide me back to my bed. The river is frozen.